SA's energy constraints, rampant crime and corruption have worsened the country's societal challenges, and it's behoved business leaders to meet with the President and the Cabinet to raise concerns about the implications for the economy. Martin Kingston is chair of the steering committee of B4 South Africa, a volunteer business leadership alliance. Thank you, Martin, for your time tonight. Appreciated. You say the situation that we've just discussed now, and we'll come a little bit later on to the situation in Ukraine and South Africa's stance on it. But the situation is so top of mind for CEOs that there's not a single annual report that comes out where transport, corruption and energy are not the three top-cited trouble spots.
Well, you're absolutely right, Iman, and it's been so for some time now. I believe that at the beginning of this year, we all recognized that the challenges ahead of us were very significant and that we needed to rally together to make sure that we could partner with government and support key interventions wherever they might be in these three areas, as you've said: energy, transport and logistics, and crime and corruption. If we were going to engender both the right level of partnership, but more importantly, we were going to lift confidence levels by demonstrating that we can get real traction. And CEOs across every single sector of the economy, companies large and small, have demonstrated that they're prepared to step into the ring and actually give of their time personally, of their institutional capacity, to make sure that we can resource the initiatives that are being taken under the oversight of government properly and effectively, so that we can start to address these fundamental structural constraints that prevent us achieving our objectives in terms of inclusive growth, let alone in terms of generating sustainable employment as quickly as possible.
So I'm going to come back to this institutional capacity that you're talking about and what you've actually walked away from these discussions with in terms of turning our problems around. We have heard of risks to our trade agreements with global partners that may be imperiled by this diplomatic stance on Russia-Ukraine. In fact, a short time ago, Stanley put out a report that said we risk losing over 600 billion rand in export revenue should there be retaliation for this. You've heard earlier the South African Reserve Bank also echoing concerns about potential indirect or secondary sanctions on South Africa. How real do you believe these are? And is South Africa foolhardy in holding the line it's holding?
Well, those issues have been raised directly with the government by business, and obviously it exacerbates an already precarious situation. But those areas are geopolitical decisions that have to be taken ultimately by the government, as opposed to these where we can bring skills and capability, insight and experience to bear both directly and indirectly. Of course, it inflames passion, we understand that, and it creates further volatility both in the currency and indeed in confidence levels. But that needs to remain fairly and squarely in the hands of the state. In these areas that we're focusing on, it's absolutely appropriate and correct for business to partner with government in a very specific, focused manner so that we can come up with interventions that move the needle, that get the flywheel turning as quickly as possible.
All right, so let's go straight then to that point. Your game plan in this context of continuous convergent crises is to join hands with government. You're pooling your skills and resources to get things moving in as functional and stability and inducing direction as possible. So what are some of the tangible outcomes, Martin?
Well, we have been working on this for some time. I just need to go back a little bit in time, Iman. I mean, everybody will remember that we created Business for South Africa as a response to COVID and the pandemic more broadly. We worked very effectively with government, particularly in the context of the design, development and operationalization of the vaccine rollout program. And we're using the same model here. So government has created three structures. One is the National Energy Crisis Committee to oversee the Energy Action Plan. The second, which has been announced now, is the National Logistics Crisis Committee to look in particular at rail and port and the associated impact on the roads. And the third, of course, is the joint initiative to fight crime and corruption. And as you say, there's not an annual report that has come out this year that hasn't mentioned not only one, but all three of those areas. We've already started working. We assembled teams under the oversight of chief executives of large South African companies with strong commitments in each of those areas. We've seen, I have to say, enormous interest from chief executives to roll up their sleeves and get involved personally as well as institutionally. We've identified a limited number of interventions in each of those areas, In the case of energy, we know that the most important thing is to address the issue of load shedding as quickly as possible. We think it's technically achievable by the end of 2024. The Minister of Electricity has already talked about the fact that we are effectively making available expertise to go into 4 power stations. There are many other areas, including reducing demand, improving efficiency, so that we can achieve that goal. The same has to apply, obviously, in transportation and logistics. We've got huge operational constraints in terms of freight, bulk transport more generally, both in respect of railways and ports. And what we think is the most effective way we can cooperate is by aggregating a sort of business response in a disciplined, organized way and meshing that with government, again, in some very focused intervention areas so that we can start to see real progress made and we can lift confidence levels. All of that, of course, requires a trust-based relationship between business and its government counterparties on a properly coordinated basis. So we've resourced ourselves to be able to achieve exactly that. We were updating the president and his cabinet colleagues on all of these developments. It's not as though we only started on Tuesday. Tuesday was a report back effectively, and we're far enough advanced to be able to announce the progress that we've made and the way forward. And the last point I'd like to say on this, Iman, is that trust in the sort of broader public is only going to be engendered if A, we demonstrate progress, but B, we report back on a regular basis, clearly, concisely, and comprehensively. That communication is an absolutely fundamental underpin, both by business as well as by government and jointly. And so for us, actually, there's a fourth area, which is how can we articulate appropriately and honestly what we're doing, what the challenges are, so that we can have a consistent narrative to actually lift confidence levels based upon real progress, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah. I mean, you've used the word trust a few times in that answer, and it's a big one in terms of the way business relates to government and whether you can engender that trust in getting projects moving and getting your intervention to be welcomed and not roadblocked at all. And then trust, of course, between government and the people that government is supposed to serve. And you're talking about a very delicate relationship. So I suppose my next question might be a little bit delicate as well, is have you honestly found government to be forthcoming, cooperative, transparent, ready to go?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, obviously, it would be misleading to suggest that in every area, there's a transparent, honest relationship between the parties. And I think that accusation can be made as easily against business as it can be against government. I mean, in every single engagement we've had, it has underpinned the approach that we're adopting. And by the way, these are not just engagements at the level of the president or indeed cabinet ministers. These are working engagements with people who actually are at the coalface of trying to address the problems. So the work that we're doing in NECOM, there are 10 work streams. We're involved in about 5 or 6 of them at the moment. That is absolutely the basis on which we have to work. There are bound to be problems and snags. I have to say that our experience during COVID was that we did establish a relationship of trust, not just one where we were trusted by society to deliver what we were saying, but between the counterparties within government and business. But it'll only be as good as the commitment of the individuals and the institutions involved. I think that the framework is appropriate. And also we put in place governance arrangements, once again modeled on what we had during COVID, a joint strategic operating committee chaired by the Director General in the Presidency in this particular case, which will meet every 2 weeks. I think that will be a very good basis to actually air any issues that arise, including issues pertaining to either trust or delivering against commitments on both sides with a constructive mindset. As you said at the outset, we're facing, in a way, an economic and social crisis, which is almost existential in terms of the direction of travel, which we have to reverse as quickly as possible. We're only going to do that if we trust one another based upon our commitment, our competence, and our resolve.
Yeah. People also trust what they see, Martin. So when things begin to change in South African society, the needle is shifted. Of course, there'll be a great deal of palpable support from the electorate for the projects and these collaborations that you're endeavouring and embarking upon with government. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Business for South Africa Chair Martin Kingston.